Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee.
Meow! I'm Huples Cat. Modern Refugee recently did an excellent video on how to get out of a city in a disaster.
We got traffic.
I strongly encourage you all to watch him despite how he pronounces the word.
Was through the roof.
He discusses his experience staying in Detroit for a week. It was his first visit to Detroit since 2020. Modern Refugee's videos are always thought-provoking and interesting. He has given me permission to use the clips that I'm going to use, but you should watch the entire video.
Now, it's often said on the prepping channels, get out of the city. You don't want to be in the city when something goes wrong.
While this is true, there is one huge exception to this rule. If there's a sudden hugely killing pandemic and you don't die, stay in the city. Find an empty office block, get all the supplies you can find and put them in that office block and enjoy. You'll have enough supplies to last you 5 to 15 years if you stay in the city. The stores of gasoline, oils, food and water and clothing outside of the cities is minimal. The people who survive in the rural areas in a massively killing pandemic are not going to have anywhere near as much stuff and survival ability as you will have. It's no secret that most preppers and most wannabe preppers plan to leave their area and flee in the event of a disaster. That was my plan. But then I realised the problems with that plan and I actually bugged out. I fled and I retired to where I wanted to be in a disaster. Location, location, location.
There is the opinion that people are going to flood out of the cities if something bad happens. I don't disagree with that in its entirety, but there are some things that there are certain aspects of that I do have problems with.
Oh, they will if this happens.
Sally sold seashells by the seashore. But her seashells didn't.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we'll get right to questions. Mr. Secretary.
Well, thanks, John, and thanks to everybody. I'm really glad to be with you. I know you're covering the situation in Europe closely.
Normal programming has been interrupted at the request of the U.S. government. Everyone receiving this.
After this,
British authorities have commenced Operation Sassoon, the mass evacuation of London and surrounding areas. Location centres have been set up by the government in the north of England for all those made homeless after the attack. From its temporary base in Manchester, the government have introduced controversial new security measures.
back to Modern Refugee.
When we were going down there and we were, seeing the traffic, we haven't been down in a major urban area for probably 5 years. And so there's been a lot of things that have changed since 2020 that I personally noticed as far as the degradation of the infrastructure.
This is true in most North American cities, as money simply has not been placed where it should have been placed in terms of maintaining and creating new infrastructure. While
the amount of people was through the roof. There were 3 major accidents in the major arteries that were going into the Detroit metro area in the 7 days that we went down there. One was a 30-car pileup because we got a little snow that night and everybody crashed into each other. It was a massive traffic jam.
and population has exploded in most North American cities, so the traffic congestion, pollution and general irritation has all risen. Add in any small traffic accident and
World's worst traffic jam?
We got traffic.
This epic sight was the 405 freeway in Los Angeles Tuesday night. It's a highway infamous for gridlock, but nothing ever like this.
then
It took us a long time to get rerouted around those areas, and there was no GPS and no map that would help you get out of those situations. When you were in that mass, you were in that mass.
this is a truly excellent point. Once you're in gridlock traffic, you're stuck in there until the government, such as it is, rescues you. Always have a lot of gasoline in your vehicle, but still, in a massive disaster, you might have to get out of your car in traffic and walk away.
Entire swaths of the American Midwest are obliterated. Washington, D.C., London, and Berlin are decimated in fiery explosions. A quiet rural town in upstate Maine is annihilated. In a matter of minutes, 50 million people will die.
People might try to flee the cities, but if there is some type of massive traffic disruption, if there's accidents, there's some kind of, civil unrest, whatever, people are going to be trapped in those areas. They're not going to be able to just exfiltrate out of those areas.
Imagine there's been a nuclear war in Europe. Would people stay calm in the North American cities? Would you be able to drive out? Would people flee even if they were told not to? Of course, it might be regional, but still modern refugees' points remain valid, and many preppers like I used to be are still in urban areas and plan to flee in a disaster. Given a head start, there is no problem doing this by car, but do we overestimate our ability to flee ahead of the herd? I say we do. This of course ignores the entire topic of where on earth you're going to flee to and what will happen when you get there, but that's way beyond this video.
If there's some type of event and there is no emergency services, there's no wreckers to move stuff, there's no bulldozers to push things off the road so people can continue to keep moving, nobody's going to go anywhere except maybe on foot. And vehicle travel is going to be, non-existent.
We're already dependent on an awful lot of different things to keep our urban areas from grinding into gridlock. We know this already, and we know that a few people can actually make a huge difference to survivability. What happens if you live in a high crime area or plan to drive through one? Or if a devastating threat is believed to be incoming?
Another plane struck the second tower. There was a little bit of confusion at the time. As one of the towers collapsed, we lost our ability to communicate. So I was sent out as a relay just to pass information. Saw people jumping into the water trying to swim to Brooklyn because the smoke plume was just forcing people off of the island. So, made the call of all available boats.
All available boats. This is the United States Coast Guard. Anyone want to help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan, report to Governor's Island.
It ended up responding to that radio call. Tugboats, we had dinner cruises, we had, some of them were very large, the Staten Island Ferry, and all types of vessels were there requesting help. And here's a means, here's a mechanism that we can harness our energy for the good of our common man.
And this is a special edition, part of CBS News' continuing coverage of the blackout of 2003.
Could be worse. In fact, the entire city is really jammed at this point. Subway service is out. Bridges and tunnels are jammed. Some bridges are being used only as a pedestrian walkway. Hours into this situation, Dan, the mood has moved from anxiety, mass anxiety, to massive inconvenience. The streets are filled with thousands of people. The only way to get around is through the express bus service, and of course there's not enough of them to accommodate all the people who need to get where they need to go.
Dan, I'm actually here in New Haven at Union Station, and obviously the biggest concern for the people here are the hundreds of commuters that head into New York every day via the Metro North Railroad. That diesel-powered fuel trains are going to be going over to those Metro North trains and dragging them and rescuing them back here to Union Station.
Traffic lights were off.
What I saw today were people acting intelligently and courageously and with kindness and taking care of each other, directing traffic, looking out for one another. It was fantastic.
You a police officer?
No, I'm a teacher.
How did you get into this?
I came out and there was nobody directing traffic.
Have you ever directed traffic before?
No, I haven't. I teach high school.
Yeah, what's easier? What's easier, that or this? They seem to listen to you.
A lot of times they don't.
Just like the high school.
Mostly they do. They're amazingly cooperative, and most people are saying thank you. Okay.
79th and Amsterdam, for those who've never been to New York, is one of the busiest intersections in the city. Hello.
Hang on. Sam, who I know from my building, came out with me, and then somebody else joined us over there. So that's what's happening.
In 2024, you're going to flee, but...
One lane in each direction type situation. You can imagine what that would be like if there would be some kind of panic where people were trying to get out of there. It would be an absolute and complete nightmare.
But will car evacuation even be possible, even if there's no ice, no snow, no flooding, no rubble in the roads, no trees down? You're relying on normalcy bias. You're relying on the fact that the towns and communities you're going to drive through aren't going to barricade the roads, drag you out of the car and take everything you've got. Oh, I know you're all planning to use your guns, but so are they. In 1977, New York City had an awful lot of poverty in the inner city area.
It was just after 9:30 p.m. when the streetwalkers in Times Square were suddenly doused in darkness, when thousands of passengers on graffiti-scarred trains became stuck, often in tunnels.
There was absolutely no panic, and you'd never know that there was any kind of emergency.
At first, in much of the city, there was a spirit of calm resilience, civilians directing traffic. Surgery moved outside at Brooklyn Jewish Hospital to utilize car batteries as backup power. With her own power generation facility, the Statue of Liberty remained lit. But the tired, the poor, the huddled masses she beckoned soon became restless, agitated, and violent.
The situation here in Brownsville was described as anarchy, war, rioting.
It was terrible. I could see from my window there, everybody looting, taking furniture, everything.
People was getting hurt, you know, stealing, looting, and it wasn't a pretty thing. It was awful.
Unlike much bigger power outages in 1965 and 2003, New York City in 1977 was very much on edge. The Son of Sam was stalking, and the fabric of the cash-strapped city was coming apart. The blackout was a tipping point in sweltering, poverty-stricken neighborhoods, and the NYPD was weakened by layoffs and low morale. And yet, countless examples of compassion in the face of chaos. At Tom's Restaurant, popular in Prospect Heights since the 1930s, African Americans formed a human chain around the place to protect it from looters. About 25 hours later, the power was restored. More than 3,700 were arrested, an estimated $300 million worth of damage done. Michael Alessi was 17, helping his father run the place.
We knew a lot of the people, but that one day was a different story because the people, they were desperate. I mean, they were very desperate. I saw a different side to them that day.
A side no one wants to see again.
I think people will try to flee the cities if something bad happens. I'm not sure they're going to be able to.
Communication in disaster is straightforward. Text only. No emojis, no pictures. Oh, and the most important thing, rather than communicating with your loved ones, is get out and go to a pre-arranged safety point.
With only emergency lights to guide them, commuters rushed to get home. But with subways stalled in mid-run, travelers soon found themselves back outside, with only one option: to wait.
What are you going to do? You have to be patient. What else can you do?
Many tried getting hold of loved ones. Only a few were able to get through.
Just calling to let you know that I'm fine, everything's okay.
Fleeing by buses, trains, cars may all not work out for you very well in a disaster, depending on what's going on. If you can, use them, but use them early.
Meanwhile, thousands continue to pour out of office towers, some stumbling down stairs in complete darkness for close to an hour. In the darkness comes the fear and the question, however irrational: could this be another September 11th?
You can't allow that. If you allow that, you'll panic when there's nothing.
By early evening, fear turned to anger at Ontario's premier for privatizing hydro.
What about flying out in your private jet?
At the airports, thousands were stranded, with most flights grounded. Have you received any information yet?
I've received none at all. I've actually just been to the desk to complain now.
Depending on the issue, all train service might be suspended. All highways might be closed down by local law enforcement and or the National Guard. And I can pretty much guarantee all flights will be halted. So?
Try not to get caught in those urban areas, but sometimes, like with us, it was a medical thing. You had to be down there anyway. So anyway, appreciate all you guys. You guys take care.
Excellent video, Modern Refugee. Thank you very much for that. It's nice to have sane and sensible things being said in the preppersphere. But we all need to realise if we actually do have a nuclear war, expect blackouts, mass panic, and very little traffic on the roads that's going anywhere. None of your electronics are going to work, and pretty much there's going to be mass looting everywhere. It will be absolute chaos. Your goal will be to hide in place if you can. So Modern Refugee is right. Driving out may well be impossible from the urban areas. I'd like to point out it might well be impossible in rural areas as well. If you intend to flee in a disaster from a city or from anywhere, you really need to know the location you're fleeing into and from. Even if you're a lazy terrier, the best way is by foot. This is how you learn the area. You learn where the water is that you probably won't even notice from a car. The most likeliest disaster that's going to hit you is climate change. It's going to be a sudden and absolutely catastrophic disaster caused by the climate changing in your area. Your weather is not as stable as it used to be. For example, at the end of February here, I planned to bug out, if I had to bug out, using snowshoes and my minus 40 centigrade coat and a huge amount of supplies and a cook stove so I can cook. Well, the last few weeks, the last few months, I've kind of put a damper on that expectation. The plan to flee with sleds laden with supplies across frozen lakes isn't going to happen this year. It wouldn't be safe. On the plus side, I'm burning a lot less wood and the council's using a lot less sand and salt on the roads. And there's not as much ploughing. On the negative side, local trees, plants, fungi and animals are all being taken by surprise by this incredibly hot spring weather we've had for weeks now. And again, it's going to dip below freezing in a couple of days, down to minus 15 centigrade again for a few more days, and then up again above freezing. You might need to flee out of a rural area as well. Being in the rural area doesn't magically make you safe from all disasters.
We're going to be looking at some live pictures out of New York City at just after 5 o'clock Eastern Time. This is the scene in New York as thousands of people pour onto the streets in the midst of a massive power blackout in New York and across much of the eastern seaboard.
Territory out of power. You have to bring it on. So you bring on a little bit of power there, and there are two things that can put that out of balance. One is a major loss of transmission, so all of a sudden you've got a lot of generators.
So you must know the hiking and biking trails in your city. Walk and bike them often. In a disaster is not the time to learn them. In Modern Refugee's comments, I suggest an inflatable boat if you live in Detroit or a similar city like New York. I was told, do you know how big the Detroit River is? Yeah, I do. But for most of you can safely paddle across. If you can't, just follow the bank until you find an easier crossing. In 2003, there was a blackout in North America. About 100 million people in Eastern America and Canada suffered no power for a couple of days. Amongst many local areas that were affected, Detroit-Windsor bridges were absolutely slam-jammed. If you throw in a blackout and you throw in a nuclear war, don't expect to drive across. Location, location, location. Don't overlook boats. Don't overlook bicycles. Don't overlook walking out. Don't overlook trains, don't overlook buses. Think about different scenarios, think about how you are going to get out, what you're going to take with you, who you're going to take with you, and what you're going to do when you get there. But car dependency in prepping is a fatal error, and I'm really happy that Modern Refugee pointed this out. Have a great day. Toodles. This has been a Tiny Terrier bored by the video making process 2024.